Hey everyone, welcome to the Art of the Editorial video.
Hey everyone, this is the post-production part of the Art of the Editorial video that we have launched on DEDPXL. And what I'm going to do is pull up some of these photos, talk about how I color correct them, get them ready for delivery. And I'll be talking about putting the panoramic portraits together, the ones that we shot for the video. I'm going to show you some of that, how I deal with those files, and a few little tips and tricks that I do in Photoshop for a number of editorial jobs that I do. Again, this is part of the Art of the Editorial video that is for sale at deadpixel.com, and this post-production video is for free if you want to watch it. So let's take a look at Brian Purcell here. This is the owner of Three Taverns Brewery here in Decatur, Georgia, and shot some portraits of him. And I wanted to start off with this picture, keep it kind of simple. I'm working in Lightroom. I'm working with a Fuji RAW file, and I get asked a lot, how do I deal with Fuji RAW files? And I usually deal with Fuji RAW files like I deal with any other file. If you shoot the image clean and get it close to where it needs to be, I don't see any need to have to do any magic to them. Let's head on over into develop. Now, the first thing that I notice with this is the color temperature is fairly cool in nature. It's going a little too into the blue spectrum for me. And the first thing that I will do on an image is I'll make sure that the exposure is correct. And for me, exposure looks pretty good on this. If it was a little dark or a little bright, I'd want to maybe pull that in. Maybe I'll pull in the highlights, the white slider just a little bit to bring a little bit of that sheen down just a hair. But that looks pretty good to me. Now, what I'm going to do is grab my temperature slider. I'm working on a calibrated monitor, and you're watching this on YouTube, so God only knows what we all may be seeing here. But if you are new to color correction, the best thing to do is to move in big motions with just your temperature slider, because you're going to see that, of course, that's way, too cold. That's insane. And then that's way too warm. And if you sit and just bounce back and forth and you start to get those motions smaller and slower, you will see where this was somewhere where we started. I'm looking at the gray in his hair right now, and it's going kind of blue. I want that to get to be a little more neutral in color. And I'm looking at his skin tone. I want it to warm up just a little bit. Now, if I go too far, that's just too much. He's starting to get that Mitt Romney spray tan look kind of thing. And if I bring it down, he's starting to cool off and get kind of dead looking. I'm looking for something that's neutral in color. And as I slowly slide this slider, I'm going to say it's somewhere right around in there. Now, there are a number of things you can do. You can use color checkers, which I do on color critical jobs. I'll shoot a color checker if I'm shooting product or just something is absolutely color critical. A person is wearing a red jacket that just has to be that red. Then I'll typically pull a color checker out so I can build a profile off of whatever lighting condition I'm in. With kind of run and gun editorial stuff, if color isn't super dead on critical, I just kind of eyeball it until it looks right to me. And just kind of warmed up about right there. Looks pretty good. I don't think I need to do any sharpening. I like to add clarity, a little bit of clarity to my pictures. But you have to be careful in portraits. It can sometimes accentuate blemishes and things like that you may not want accentuated. So let's say it's that. And I think finally I want the dark shadows to have a little more richness to them. So I'm going to go in here to my black slider. I'm holding down my Option key to see what is clipping. And by clipping, it means there's zero detail in those dark shadows. And I don't want it to look like that. It'll be horrible to print. All that ink will just build up and build up and build up on the page. And I'm always thinking about print. I know most of everything we do these days seems to be for the web, but you have to remember print. And while you might make something that like, ooh, that looks cool on a screen, it may be absolutely horrible in print. Let's go there. Let's bring those shadows in just a bit. Maybe I'm going to sneak those whites back up just a little. Boom. I may even take my exposure slider and just punch it just a little. Basically, I'm just dealing with contrast. I could take my contrast slider and move it up and down. Sometimes that works. But basically, I'm dealing with contrast at the highlight and the shadow level instead of one just overall universal slider to do it. And I'm thinking that looks pretty good for what I am looking for on the screen. Eyes are sharp. Light looks good. There's detail in his dark shirt. Highlights aren't too blown out. Let's take this over into Photoshop real quick, and I'm just going to work on those highlights just a little bit right there. All right, now that we're in Photoshop, there's really not much I'm going to do to this other than just tone down the highlights a little bit. And there's really like a ton of ways to do this. I've found that something that's, not too shiny, too bright right there. What I will do is get my eyedropper tool. I will select a flesh tone somewhere near the area I'm wanting to affect. And then I'm going to get my brush, and my brush is going to be set to the color mode right here at about a 20% or less opacity. And something is screwed up with Photoshop on my computer right now so that I can't see my full cursor. If I bring my size down, that's great, but as soon as I take my brush up, it stops for some reason. So there's some sort of cursor issue. But it's going to be a fairly large brush, let's say, and hardness is going to be set pretty low. I want a very soft edge to that. And then basically I'm just going to come in and just quickly paint in over those little highlight areas. I don't want to get too much or it will start to look airbrushed. But what that does is it takes the color of the area that you selected near the highlight and it just kind of tones it down a little bit. And I find that that's better than trying to burn down a highlight. There are other ways of doing this with the clone tool and things like that. But I've found that just for typically what I need to do is I make a selection and I go in and I just quickly knock that down just a little bit. And that's it for that. Now back in Lightroom, I like this as color. I also like it as black and white. And typically if I want to deliver both, I'll create a virtual copy. So I have two copies basically now. I go into the black and white slider over here on the right, the black and white window. Then I'm going to grab the bullseye tool and I'm going to go into the flesh tones area and I'm just simply with my mouse scrolling up. I don't want to scroll up too much, but I'm picking a few different areas on his face. I just want to lighten that up just a bit. And for his shirt, I want to darken it. I like my black and whites to have a really nice, strong, snappy contrast to them. I do not like that super faded, horrible, just whatever god-awful shit that's going on with black and whites these days. That's super faded, and everyone thinks it looks like film, but it doesn't. Anyways, I won't go off anymore on that. So again, just kind of tweaking contrast. I don't want to lose too much details there in the shadows. Not much at all. I don't want it to go that dark. So I'm just constantly hitting that Option key on the keyboard, just making sure I don't clip. You can also check your highlights to see what's clipping on highlights. We're not going to take it near that far. And I'm going to call it around there. Now, I love vignetting, so typically everything gets just a little bit of a vignette, especially my black and whites. In the darkroom days, we called it the four-corner burn, and I kind of dig that. And that's looking pretty good to me. Let's move on to the next thing. All right, panoramic portraits. This is probably something that's just, I need to make an entire video on, just on panoramic portraits. But this is my first pano portrait that I personally shot, and it was out of necessity. I was hired by a magazine to shoot a series of authors in their offices and workspace where they write. So, picture of the portrait, a portrait of the author within their environment. And I wanted to shoot the entire job on my medium format. And the widest lens at the time I owned for the medium format was a 55 millimeter, which is an equivalent of about a 35 millimeter on a DSLR. So this is an author named Tom Junod, and his office was basically like in a third spare bedroom in his house. And I was back against the wall, and the original image, what I could see with my 55 millimeter was probably somewhere around there. And I could not see anything past that. I could have shot this with the Fuji or equivalent with a wider lens that I had, but this was going to be a 7-image series, most of them running full page, and I really wanted the clarity and the dynamic range that the medium format gives me, but I didn't have a lens wide enough. And I'm sitting in Tom's office freaking out, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to shoot this? I'm trying this angle, that angle. I'm trying to angle from the back of the room. I'm standing in the hallway, trying to see if I can get an angle there. And then I started thinking about stitched portraits that Art Streiber has shot in the past, and Joey L. And then my friend Rick Wenner in New York did a blog post back some time ago about photographing a DJ in a very small apartment, and he did a stitched portrait, and it looked fantastic. So I thought, well, yeah, it's like shooting a panoramic of the Grand Canyon, or some vista, and you just take several images and then you merge them together in Photoshop. Yes, that is what I'm going to do. So that is what I began working on in Tom's office. I locked my camera down on a tripod. I locked down white balance, exposure, all of that, so nothing would change from frame to frame. And then I shot picture, 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 and figured I'm going to figure this out in Photoshop later. So it was a bit of a risk, being as I'd never done it before, and I was doing it on a job, and this was the first part of a 7-portrait assignment. I went ahead and shot the cover your ass pictures with my Fuji camera and a wide angle lens, just in case for some reason the stitching did not work out. But this was the series that I ended up shooting. All of it was shot medium format. All of it was stitched. But this was before I had the panoramic head. And I had to go in and do things like rebuild crown molding, because very long lines like that, you can see here, it's still probably just a little messy, but it ended up getting cropped under that, so that was good. Oh, and here, look at this. You can see right there where that stitch did not work out well. The final image that went to print was somewhere around like that. So luckily what went to print was not that bad. So yeah, this was the stuff that I shot, authors in their space. All of these are stitches. I ended up stitching the whole entire job. This one, it really helped me out. And I had to rebuild a number of vertical and horizontal lines because I did not have that panoramic head. And once I got that panoramic head, it was off to the races for me. Once I get the camera kind of set up and in the proper position for shooting panoramics from a tripod, all of that post-production of having to fix things went away, and it made my life about 1 billion times easier. But here is the deal with panoramic portraits for me, is that as I look at this picture, I know for a fact I do not own that lens or that camera. I know my lenses, I know my cameras, I know the perspective that my lenses give me, I know the depth of field that my lenses give me at certain distances from my subjects. I have shot thousands upon thousands upon thousands of pictures through my cameras and through my lenses. And when I look at this picture that I know that I photographed with a camera I own and a lens I own, the final resulting picture, I don't own that camera. Because for me, this is the best way I think I can describe panoramic portraits, is that it gives whatever camera you're shooting the look of the next format size up. So that means if you're shooting something like a mirrorless camera or a DSLR 35 millimeter something based camera, and you shoot a stitched portrait, and that final composed stitched portrait is going to look as though it was shot medium format. And when I'm shooting medium format stitched portraits, the final look for me is that of a 4x5 or an 8x10 large format camera. The perspective, the depth of field, the angle of view, that I don't own that lens. I just don't. I do not own that lens. That lens is not in my medium format bag yet. I shot that picture. And what happens is, as you change your subject to camera distance, as you get closer into your subject or you get further away from your subject, you're changing things like perspective, you're changing depth of field, you're changing the relationship of the size of that subject to their background. And so moving in and out from and further away, closer to, blah, 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 to your subject is changing the look of the picture. If I was sitting here photographing Tom in his office and just slapped a really wide angle lens on to get this field of view, he would have that wide angle distortion. He would be stretched. His hand would be larger than his head. The background would recede further into the background. The depth of field would increase as I go wider angle. And it would have that wide angle sort of look. And what the stitched portrait is giving me is a standard, like, let's say 50 millimeter lens in a DSLR 35 millimeter equivalent. A 50 millimeter normal lens, but it's giving me something like a 28 millimeter field of view. I get the standard perspective. I get that little bit shallower depth of field, but I'm getting a wider field of view. There's a big difference between depth of field and field of view, right? The field of view is how much you can see left to right and up and down in a picture. The depth of field is how your focus is falling in or out through your picture. So that is where I fell in love with panoramic portraits. First, it was a necessity just to get this particular picture. And then once I put it together, I was like, oh my God, I love this look. I started going crazy and shooting it all the time. So now I've invested in a panoramic portrait or panoramic head. I use the Really Right Stuff system. I've found it to be the best for what I need. And I think, again, I said it before, I'm going to just have to do a whole video on panoramic portraits. You can also look up Ryan Brenizer. He's got his own like kind of magic and sauce that he puts onto this technique. And a lot of people call it the Brenizer effect. And he does some really amazing stuff with stitched portraits. So go give him a look as well. So let's jump back into the editorial job. All right, let's put a stitch together. I'm going to pull this picture here of Brian. And for me, color, exposure, everything looks pretty good. I nailed my white balance and my exposure pretty well in camera. I don't feel like I need to do too much to it. The number one thing when you're shooting for panoramic portraits is that you don't change your settings on your camera while you're shooting the portrait. So do not be on auto white balance. Do not be on any kind of auto exposure setting. You need to be manual white balance. You need to be manual exposure, and you need to be manual focus. You focus in on your subject, get your subject sharp, in focus, properly exposed, of good white balance, and do not touch anything while you shoot it, because basically think about, you're going to take 9 or 12 or however many pictures, and then they all need to seamlessly stitch together. And if your white balance is changing, or your exposure is changing, or even your focus is changing between each shot, they're not going to come together very well, because shot number 1 and shot number 4 and shot number 8 are going to be different from each other, and it's going to be hard to seamlessly put those together into one believable portrait. So the first thing I'm going to do is just select these. They all look fine. I'm not going to touch them. I'm going to leave them like that, and I am going to export these. So let's export these. Now, for the sake of doing this video, let's do it. Let's do full size, full res JPEG. And I am going to do, I've already set up a few things here. I am going to do Brian 01 Pano. Let's do that. And Lightroom is going to export that out. While it is doing that, I'll get the next one ready. So here, I do want to make a few changes. I feel it's a little too warm. I feel like exposure could pop up just a hair. And I think that it's just a little too warm on that color temperature. That's too cool, too warm, too cool. Yeah, somewhere about right there looks pretty good. And then I'm going to kind of leave it at that. I'm not going to do any vignettes. I don't need any sharpening. I may do a touch of clarity just because I always feel like I want to. I'm gonna leave it about right there. Now, I've worked this image up. I worked that first one up. I picked that one so I can see his face, his skin tone, and all of that the best. And then I'm going to synchronize everything else to that. So there are actually 2 panos in this line of pictures here. So I'm going to go synchronize all of that. And, I need to synchronize this last one over here. And let's go ahead and export this. Now, I brought these into Lightroom without my handy-dandy hand in front of the lens. So I believe this pano goes to here. I think that's right. And we're going to export. Export. Full res JPEG. We'll make another one, Brian 02. Sometimes it's, especially if you're working with Photoshop to do this, it's a little easier to keep these in separate folders. I'll show you why in just a second. All right, so that looks good. Now let's export this one and export. We're going to do a new folder. Brian 03 Pano. Open. Okay, and that's exporting. Now, the first one is exported, so let's go over and find those pictures. And we're going to go to desktop. We're going to go to editorial. We're going to go to Brian 01. Now, I have found best results. I use a program called Pano Giga. And Pano Giga was built by very very smart people, and it does amazing math and stuff. And I don't know 90% of the shit else that it does. So I'm going to show you about the whole 3% of what I know this program does. I've watched videos, and it's just mind-boggling all that can be done with this. So basically, I just take my pano, I drag it in, I hit play, and it's going to go through its little process here. It's quick, it's fast, it does a great job. Now I'm going to hit the edit button here on this side. And basically the two things that I mess around with most are the projection settings, because it changes the perspective, and that's sometimes important if you've got some weird lines or something's not looking right. You can go through here and find which one of these is going to work best for you and which one looks most natural. Because sometimes you'll find, like, this one's bowing him out too much. His legs are getting small. His head is getting large. There he looks more natural. That one, it looks pretty good. I'm looking at all of the vertical lines to make sure they're just not like whacked out, going crazy, like this, like they're bending too much. So I think I am going to go with the cylindrical. I think that looks pretty good. And this is going to show you something that I end up doing too often at times, is I missed a slice when shooting my panoramic. I get a little too excited and all of that. So we're going to go with that. And then we are going to hit this button right here, which is going to export it to wherever you want it. You can give it a file name. You can give it a destination. I'm just going to throw it onto my desktop for right now. And I typically have it set to anti-ghost. It's going to be at a 12. And it's going to be at 300 DPI. It's going to be a JPEG. I can send it out as a PNG, as a PSD, as a TIFF, whatever. I'm just going to do JPEG for right now. And I'm going to hit render, and it's going to do its thing. Now, remember, we threw full resolution 40 megabit pictures into it. So it takes, a minute or so for it to pull this all together. While that is doing that, let's go in and go get Brian 02. Doop-a-doop-a-doop. Bump. Hit detect. Let that do its thing. And we're going to get Brian 03. And we're going to grab these and pull that in. And I will start working on this one. Right now I'm looking at the line of that bar. I want it to be straight. And that looks pretty good. I can also go in here and just give this a crop. And one day I'm going to get really super technical with my panos, and I'm going to just nail it to the degree. All right, now I'm just kind of sloppy and I just overshoot a little bit. But Auto Pano Giga just makes it work. It just makes it happen. I love it. It's super simple. It's fast. And it hits it about 99% of the time. I'm going to go ahead and start this to output. One thing I wish is it would save the settings that you last used, not 3000 DPI. Render. All right, and let's see how this one looks. And that looks pretty good to me. I'll go ahead and give it a pre-crop. Pull this down, and I'm gonna pull this in, and I'm gonna pull that in. That looks pretty good where that is. To leave that one or not? I think I'm gonna lose that one. And I'm gonna end up taking out this light fixture because it doesn't need to be there. All right, that looks good. Hit enter, close that out, and render this sucker. 12, 300, render. All right, great. So those are moving right along. And while those are getting spit out, I'm going to go over to my desktop, grab my first one, which should be, is it this one? It is this one. Here we go. I'm going to pull this into Photoshop. And on all of these panoramics, typically I'll just get everything kind of color correct and contrast and everything's pretty good. And then I'll clean it up. I'll get it cropped how I want it. And once that's all set, then any other tweaks to, contrast or color, anything that I want to do, I'll do it once the whole panoramic is done. So let's go in and just crop off to the edges here. Come down just a little bit just to see what we're working with. I don't like this bright spot down here, so I'm probably going to kind of crop into that just a little bit like that. And it's going to do its thing. It's a really big picture. If we look at this right now where it stands, we go into layer, image size, inches. It's currently 56.5 inches by basically 36. 56.5 by 36 inches at 300 DPI. It's a really, really big file. So here's what we're going to do. We got to fix this thing. And that's going to be a fairly easy fix. I'm kicking myself right now that I didn't shoot it well. So I'm drawing a marquee around that. And then I'm going to hit J for the healing brush. And I'm using the healing patch. And let's try this. It's a very big picture. Yeah. So what I will do now is I will just go in and clean this up just a little bit. Maybe I'll need to clean it up a little better than that. I'm just going to use my J. Just going to soften down that edge in there where it bleeds in. Maybe I will do one of these numbers. All right, about there. Oops. Clean that up. Clean that up. Clean that up. Clean that up. Just kind of soften all of that together to where it looks like it's supposed to be like that. And now I'm going blind. Let's go like that. And let's scroll up to the top. Do something like that. Oh, shit. That was no good. Let's get... I found the healing brush doesn't know what to do when you're at the edge of a photo. So we'll do that. Then we'll grab this and we're going to pull this over to here and clean it up like that. Boom. Done. Okay. Now for final crop, I'll give this to an art director because it's so big. Let's say it's a 9x12 magazine. All right. So let's just say we're going to do a 9x12 inch. It's a 9x12 magazine and it's 300 DPI. And we're going to say that is, yes. So there's our 9x12 300 DPI layout. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this picture of Brian and we're going to pull it in over here to give you an idea of how much stinking room there is. You can run a full-size headshot out of this. So this area right here is 9 by 12. So that gives a photo editor quite a bit of room to work with when they want to run this. And if they want to run it double truck, they have more than enough for that. If they want to run it half a page, it runs well as half a page. It can run full page. It can run as a headshot. Like, it's seriously so much resolution, you're typically throwing it away by the bucketful. Not even lying. Let's go grab another one. Let's grab this one. Is this the one we want? Yeah, let's grab this one. Let's grab that. Open it up in Photoshop. All right. And, you know, I don't think it needs to be that vertical. I think something like this, almost square, I like. And I see a little bit of my softbox in there that I would need to go and get rid of. I kind of like that right there. So that getting all cropped down is still gives me a 34 by 37 inches at 300 DPI. Like, a lot. Let's zoom into 100% here. 50%, 66, 100%. It's sharp. It looks good. There's plenty of room. If he needs to run a headshot just from this picture, he can come in at full size print and just run that. Because think about it, that would be about what the camera was shooting natively anyways. If we go back into Lightroom and we take a look at this, natively, that's the size, close to. All right. So panoramics give you an interesting perspective that your camera normally won't give you. It gives you a shallower depth of field it normally won't give you for that perspective that it's normally not giving you. It gives you massive file sizes, which can be a little slow and burdensome and a burden on your computer or your workflow. But the final image is typically, when you pull it off, is just gorgeous. And I'm a big fan. All right, let's close this down. Let's go back over to Lightroom. So we've done a couple panoramics. We've done some black and white. These are the pictures that Bernard, in the editorial video, Bernard was shooting over on the white seamless. They needed some like square, kind of like LinkedIn and Tumblr and Twitter and Facebook profile pics of the staff. So that's what Bernard was shooting. I also went back and shot some behind the scenes stuff back in the kitchen. It just took a Fuji X100 and the XT1 and shot some stuff in the kitchen and during the beginning of dinner service, and just to kind of wrap up the whole package to give portraits. They got the food pictures, they got some behind the scenes stuff, they got some things for social media and all of that, a whole production of stuff. And they were really, really super happy with all of that. Let's go get this picture. I will show you some things that I do and post on this. So first things first is color. Color's a little weird. We've got 3 different color temperatures. We have the color temperature of this welder, whatever that's arcing out, which is kind of cool. Then we have all the fluorescent lights, and then there was a window not too far off here giving me something completely different. So for this kind of situation, I'm going to take it to where I just feel comfortable with it. So we have 3 things going on. I'm just wanting to, I want to make the mask look good because Lincoln Electric is one of Brian's sponsors, and so it was important to get those logos and their name in it. So let's call it that. And then I am going to touch a bit of clarity here. Clarity just gives it a little extra crunch that I like. I'm going to bring those whites down in the glove just a little bit with my white slider and maybe my highlights. But my highlight's going to affect a whole lot more than just his glove. I just want to keep a little bit of detail in there. As far as contrast goes here, holding down that Option key. How much is that blowing out? Oh, it's not blowing out that much. All right. You know, I'm digging that, but this green over here is bugging me. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to make this side of his shirt look good in this. I'm going to color correct for that, which is going to then sort of screw up my color in the center of the shot. I think this is looking pretty good back here. This is looking a little oddball. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a mask. I'm going to bring that mask right here in the middle. And I'm going to change the color temperature. No, I'm going to invert the mask and change the color temperature within that mask. And I'm going to get it to the point where it all looks about even. I want his forearm to match up with his elbow. I don't know if you can hear it on the recording, but we are getting like a hella storm at the moment. And hopefully I won't lose power in the middle of recording this. Yay! All right, so that looks pretty good. Let's pull this on over into Photoshop. This was shot with a Fuji, 160th of a second, f2.8, ISO 200, available light. With the 16 to 55 2.8 lens on that Fuji. Now, first things first, some stuff is bugging me. First thing bugging me are these two lights up here that I need to get rid of. Now, a simple crop would get me close, except I'm starting to get into this helmet. And I was paying so much attention at the time to the sparks and smoke and stuff flying that I forgot to kind of check the edges of my frame. So I need to get rid of that guy up there. There's a couple different ways I can do that. Let's get my palettes back up. Let's turn this into a background or a not background layer. First thing I can do, this is like the lazy man way of dealing with it. But if you can pull it off without anyone noticing it, it kind of works. Since I just need to get rid of that light. It's really bugging me. Your eye is going to go to the brightest part of the image. I'm just going to kind of pull it up a little bit. Now, you and I just saw this whole thing skew and distort a little bit. And now we see it kind of skewed and distorted. But here's the thing. You and I know that it's skewed and distorted. Most other people wouldn't notice. And what I'll do is I'll counteract that top skew with a little bit of the bottom skew. Now, again, you and I just saw it happen. But like if we walk away and we go off to something else and we start looking at, let's look at this picture, blah, 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 blah. Look at the picture. He's looking out the window. This is a panoramic portrait. This was shot with a 56 millimeter on the Fuji X-T1. I believe it was. Fuji X-T1. Yes, 56 millimeter lens at 1/60th of a second at f1.2. It was shot raw, and then it was worked up, as you've seen here in Lightroom, and put into Auto Pano Giga, and blah, 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 blah. Now, we go back to this shot. It doesn't... do you remember that it's skewed? I mean, are you looking at it going, oh my God, it's so skewed? No, not really. Like, it doesn't have that skewed kind of look because we forgot about it. So it kind of works. I've pulled this off before, and no one has ever been able to say, hey, that kind of looks skewed. So that's a little quick fix. It's a whole lot better than like having to go in, find all of this stuff, rebuild it, and all of that. Time is money. All right, so we have that. Excuse me. Let's flatten this sucker back down again. And here's what we're going to do up here. I'm going to grab my handy dandy stupid cursor. I'm going in with my rubber stamp brush. I'm going to get that kind of cleaned up. Basically, what I want to do is clean up around the edge here. Then I'm going to come in with my patch tool. Patch. Let's drag to there. Boom. And let's not have that repeating. And let's kind of fix that up and feather that back out. And just feather these edges down like so. That's a little funky looking. So we're going to get our burn tool right over here. Burn tool, protect tones. I'm going to bring this down to about 0.5% on the shadows. God only knows what size my brush is at the moment. There it is. Now it's frozen. What the hell's wrong with you? Oh, that's too much. I'm going to take that to like 3%. No. Nothing to see. Nothing to see right there. Boom. Done. There we go. Now, I didn't use things like color effects and outside third-party filters and stuff like that for a long time. And it was probably to a fault. I have since started using Color Effects Pro, and I'm sort of all sorts of in love with it for a certain thing. Number one, the white neutralizer. Number two, pro contrast. And number three, tonal contrast. And there is just something about Color Effects Pro. Let's go into tonal contrast. Typically, by default, it's going to go a little too HDR. Like, it's going to push things a little too much for me. But just take a look at the before and after, how much more grit and grime and detail there is in that helmet that I'm walking away from. And in this kind of shot, I love tonal contrast, except it's a little much. So I'm going to get on these mid-tones. I'm going to back those off. I'm probably going to back off on those shadows a little bit. I'll let the shadows go soft. Mid-tones, pulling back. You can start to see them crunch right in there. I want to pull that back just a bit. For me, this kind of stuff is all about just little subtle changes. Nothing like super over the top. I can pull those highlights back down a little bit. But it just adds a really nice kind of crunch. And the shadows may be too much. You got to watch out for the shadows. They block up really quick if you push this stuff too much. And see it right there. It's, no. Not doing that. Not doing that. Right about there. I'm going to try one more filter. And that's a remove color cast filter. Just to see It's got a little magenta still in it that I would like removed. Just a little bit. Yeah. And something like that. You could also, this will probably go way too much, is detail extractor. And that really gives it that horrible, crappy HDR look if you're not careful. Oh my God. I'm choking here. Don't ever do that. Oh God. But every now and then it's kind of gives just a little structure. If you just seriously, you just use the slightest little bit of it. I'm not even going to bother with it. We're going to take that off. And we're going to say, okay. Let that do its thing. Oh, I haven't shown you how to put a stitch together in Photoshop. I forgot to do that. So this is before and after. Oh. Yeah. 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 Cool. Okay. All right. So that's that. This file, along with a lot of the other files, are included with the purchase of the Art of the Editorial video. So you get the pictures and it's got the metadata on it and all of that stuff as well. Let's close out of this. Let's go real quick back into Photoshop. And I forgot. So if you don't want to do Auto Pano Giga, you can do in Photoshop, File, Automate, Photo Merge, browse for your pictures. Let's do that. Brian 02. Let's do this one. This is why I like to keep them in separate folders, especially if using Photoshop, because you can't just drag and drop. It wants you to select them like this. Open. Now, I typically will let it do an auto on the perspective. Here are all of the things that you can choose from, like Auto Pano Giga. But why I like APG so much is I can choose those on the fly after it's put the basic panoramic together. Here, I need to start making those decisions at the beginning before I've really seen what is going to happen with them. So I'm just going to hit OK. And what this is going to do is create my merged file in Photoshop. All of the images will be on their own separate layer, and they will have a layer mask applied to them, which is an easier way to kind of tweak things than I have found with APG. APG requires some sort of master's degree in engineering to get through all of their menu systems, whereas I know how to tweak layer masks in Photoshop. And this is what I have found overall. In all things in photographic life, it's good to have two options at all times. It's good to have two camera bodies. It's good to have two flashes, even if you're only using one. It's good to have two copies of the key to your car. If you're on a job and you lock your keys in the car, you got another copy of it. And it's good to have two stitching programs, because there have been times that APG just is being stubborn and does not want to give me a good stitch. I throw it into Photoshop and it's beautiful. And there have been times I've thrown things into Photoshop to have a merge and it just can't pull it off. I throw it into APG and it puts it together beautifully and I don't ever have to worry about it again. So here it is. It's finished up. Now you see these weird little lines. Those aren't actually there. As we zoom in, they kind of disappear. They're not really there. But you can kind of see where all of the layer masks are and where all of the pictures are. And if I come in here and grab my tool, whoops, it's choosing everything. You can start to pull it apart. Kind of looks like states on a map or countries, right? Let's put that all back together. And let's just do a simple layer flatten image. Boom, done. And I'm going to come in with my crop. But see, it did a pretty good time. Did a good job on the stitch, it looks like. Let's make that a nice little square. That is the most overshot Instagram photo ever in the history of Instagram photos. And if we go into image size again, we're looking at 37 by 35 inches at 300 DPI. It's a seriously huge, massive, big picture. That's 50% resolution right there. Yeah, so that's how you pull that off in Photoshop. All right, finally, let's take care of just a quick little detail shot from 3 Taverns. Let's go into the development module. It's a little dark for my taste. I'm going to brighten that up just a bit. Holding down that option key, making sure I'm not pushing any highlights beyond clipping. It's a little too cool. I'm going to warm it up just a little bit. Definitely going to hit this with some clarity. Going to slide those darks in just a little bit, those shadows. Maybe now it's getting a little too warm for me. Back that off. Now, one thing I notice with the way the light was falling across this area right here is brighter than everything else. I would like to kind of even that out just a little bit. So I'm going to grab a mask and I'm going to pull that mask over here, and I am going to just maybe bring that exposure down a hair, drag it out really wide and feathered across. Just sort of sneak that in, something like that. Yeah, something like that. All right, this wraps up this post-production video. I hope that you've enjoyed it. That takes things from Lightroom to Photoshop to Auto Pano Giga to color effects. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments on this YouTube video or over at DEDPXL and the corresponding blog post. If you have questions or concerns or comments or feedback, or you want me to go fly a kite, or whatever you want me to do, just let me know. I hope I can make these things better for you. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you will check out the Art of the Editorial video, where we go into the lighting and the setup and the location scouting and the posing and working with clients and subjects and all of that. And again, this is a selection of images that you will see being shot in that video. Check it out at DEDPXL, DEDPXL.com. Thank you very much, everyone.